Hey everyone, we're waiting for just a couple other people to come in and then we'll get started, okay? And let us know if you can't hear us.
Alrighty, we'll go ahead and get started. I think I see we already have a raised hand, which is so exciting. And this is certainly a webinar to ask questions. And so we're glad you're here. We might wait just a little bit to start with those questions, but I'm glad that we're already engaged and excited for this webinar. So please keep your questions, raise those hands. We're happy to kind of help along the way. But to get started, this is ERAS Application Essentials, presenting your best self to residency programs. I suspect that many of you are in the thick of it, so I hope and expect that this will be a helpful presentation as you prepare your applications. To start, I'll introduce myself. My name is Coco Stewart. I am originally from Houston, Texas, but now I live in Philadelphia, and I am a urology resident at Thomas Jefferson University Hospital. And I have a couple little kitties that I enjoy. A fun little fact about me. And I've really enjoyed getting to explore Philadelphia. And I certainly love working for EMP and getting to mentor and work with students.
Awesome. Good Philadelphia pride in this webinar.
Right.
I'm Christina. I'm an epilepsy fellow at Penn. I've been working for EMP for a long time now, and it's been a delight. I've seen a lot of people reach success, which makes me really happy. And Philadelphia is a great city, so put it on your list to apply for residency. So I'll let Coco take the lead to kind of get us through the first half of this presentation.
Yeah, thanks. I agree that we are representing Philly, and it is a good place to live and a good place to eat food. A little bit about Elite Medical Prep. Christine and I both mentioned that we enjoy being tutors and seeing many people succeed, reach their goals and dreams. For me, match day the past couple of years has been extra exciting as I've had students who are matching all over. And that's really exciting to see the hard work that people put in towards medical school, which is a long and arduous journey, pay off. But Elite Medical Prep has longstanding partnerships with medical schools around the world, and we offer one-on-one tutoring and customized educational programs for all USMLE and COMLEX levels, as well as shelf exams. Today, we're focusing a little bit more on residency matching as well. We also offer tutoring and help for MCAT and medical missions admissions advising as well. But today we're talking about residency. So I suspect that many are in the residency process, but I'm not exactly sure. So we'll launch a poll, and curious, what's our audience look like? Who is applying this cycle? Who's applying next cycle? And who's just here to kind of hang out and learn about things early on? I'll give us just a few minutes to answer, or a few seconds. Nice. It looks like most people are applying this year, which means you're in the thick of it. You're in the personal statement writing and the letter asking and the application preparing part of this, which is exciting. I see a couple people will be applying next year as well, which it's great to kind of be prepared and be aware of how things will be going and what's your next year to look like. Congratulations! This is a big time in medical school. You've likely made it through step one and step two. You finally are headed towards graduation and the exciting doctor status. And now you get to apply for residency. This is certainly a scary time in life. And I've had many wonderful students that are just terrified, but it's also a really exciting time. You've worked through undergrad and organic chemistry and biochem, and you've worked through step one and reminding yourself of all that biochem. And now you get to be a doctor. You get to have a paying job. And so, congratulations. This is a great place to be. And it's an exciting time, although certainly stressful as well. A reminder of the application timeline, which I suspect we're familiar with if we're applying now, but good refresher. The 2025 season ended on May 31st, and that's for stragglers or programs that might open up an extra spot here or there after match day occurs. But we do know the majority of kind of movement occurs long before May 31st. June 4th of this year, the 2026 ERAS season began. And then on September 3rd, residency applicants may begin submitting their applications to programs. So you can log in, actually pay, click the submit button, and you're done in just a few days. This application window is actually open until September 24th. So you have a couple of weeks in there to make sure that you're pleased with everything, the way it looks, the way things are downloading and formatted. And September 24th is the date that we really recommend applications are in, if possible, because residencies at this point can begin reviewing these applications. And so oftentimes they'll download on the 24th, and those will be the applicants that they're kind of sifting through early on. And then again, at May 31st is the official end of the season. Another poll question for you. If you're applying this year, have you logged in yet and started your ERAS application? Let's launch this one. Where are you in that process? Are you almost done? You halfway through? Have you just started? If you haven't started yet, that's okay too. You'll get there. You still have some time. We're not quite to September yet, so we can handle that. And it looks like we have a good mix of people. A couple of people are almost done, putting those finishing touches on, and some others haven't quite started yet, which, as I mentioned, that's okay because you can't even begin submitting the application yet. So you might have a few longer hours or longer days ahead of you as you kind of perfect everything. But right now is really the thick of residency application time. So let's jump into it. Let's talk about your application. One of the very first things you'll have to do for that application, wherever you may be in this journey, perhaps you've already submitted it, perhaps you have not yet, is submit a professional photo of yourself. And so there's a couple of do's and don'ts. On the right here, I have an example of what might be a good residency application photo and a not so great. If you are able to have it professionally done, that can be a great way to do it. I had friends that went to the mall at J.C. Penney's and had a great professional photo taken for them. I also had friends who were able to take a great photo with their phone. And then I had others who had a professional photographer take it. So, anyway, it happens. We want it to look like it's a professional photo. By no means should it look like it's a selfie, or should you be in a t-shirt. You should be in professional clothing, more modest, conservative. A suit is often recommended for guys. Many people, we would recommend a tie as well. So this is you applying for a job, essentially. So make sure that you would be proud to apply for a competitive job with the photo that you submit. And go ahead and spend some time or some energy working on it if that means that you're able to get the most professional photo. There's different sections to the ERAS application. And in addition to submitting your photo, your background information, your contact information, your school, all of this. Then there will be different sections, such as experiences and personal statements and research that you will be submitting through the ERAS application. And this is really the bulk of your application. So it might be easy to fill out that initial part with your address and the name of the school you go to. But these parts of the application are really where you'll end up spending a lot of your time and energy investing in experiences, personal statements, letters, etc. So for the experiences part of the ERAS application, you can have up to 10 experiences. What's important to know about these 10 experiences, though, is that you should not use all 10 experiences if you're stretching to describe those experiences. So, for example, if you have 6 really strong experiences, you were a leader in this club, you were a volunteer at this clinic, you did research with this group, absolutely put it in there. At the point at which you're grasping at straws, trying to come up with numbers 7, 8, 9, it's not worth it. You should just put forth your best self. And if that means 7 experiences that are really high quality, go ahead and put those 7 experiences down. We have to remember that when people are looking through your application, they're going to be flipping through it pretty quickly. So we'd rather high yield, great information go on your application than kind of smaller stuff that maybe you don't care about that you're trying to stretch. So no fluff. Obviously, if you have 10 great experiences that you're excited to share, then share all 10. Some people even have to whittle it down to 10. But if you don't panic. That's okay. 7 or 8 experiences can still make a really strong application. On the right side of this picture here, you can see that this is what the experience will look like. So you'll add the name of the organization that you worked for, the type of experience, whether it was volunteer or research or clinical work, and then your position title. You might not have been given an official title for your volunteering or your interpreting, but then you can just kind of name it whatever title best fits what work you did. And then you can, after this, you'll be able to describe the experience as well, which is something you should be thoughtful about in how you describe these experiences that are communicating who you are, what you're passionate about, and what's important to you. There's also a part of the experiences where you can star the 3 most meaningful experiences. And so these are going to be 3 of the 10 experiences that, exactly as it says, you found the most meaningful. This will give you a little bit of extra text to add to your description of what you did. But I want you to use this extra text to say why it mattered and not necessarily what you did. So, why was this experience so meaningful for you? How did it help develop you into a better leader or a better physician or a better researcher? Instead of describing, like, I did this, I did that, I did the other, because that's what the earlier part of the experiences description is for. So, I'll say it once more. The initial part of the experiences description is to say what you did and how you did it. It can be much more descriptive, or you can even think of it as a CV format. Some people use bullet points for their experiences. But for these 3 most meaningful experiences, use that extra section to say why it mattered to you and how it helped you grow and develop the passions and develop into the physician that you'll be. There's also a section where you can add research experiences, articles, abstracts, and works in progress to your ERAS application. So this is something as well that can be a little bit tedious as you have to enter in every little, if it's a paper that you published, you'll be entering in the title, you might enter page numbers, you might enter book chapter. You really need to review it carefully to make sure that it's accurate in everything that you've published. Or if you haven't published it, it might be an abstract, but it can even be a work in progress. So if it's something that you're currently working on, so long as it's something you can talk about and that it has substance to, it's worth adding to your resume if you're far enough along that you feel confident discussing it in an interview. There are an unlimited number of research spots. So if you've published 100 papers, that's great, and you can put 100 papers in there. But many have not published 100 papers, and that's just fine as well. And so be judicious. don't add every little thing you can think of, because program directors are smart. They're bright and they'll see right through it. Of course, if you worked on a paper hard, if you have research that you're proud of, put it put it on your application. It's just important that you know any article, experience, abstract, work in progress that you put on your application. I remember for myself, before I would go into my interviews, I would even review prior papers or research articles that I had published, because if I had published them a couple of years before, I might not remember what they were about. And I wanted to make sure that I was able to prove that I knew what I was talking about and that I contributed meaningful work to whatever research experience I was sharing. Um, and that's it for the research part. Your personal statement. The personal statement to me is something that I really love, and there's others who don't love it about as much, and that's totally okay. Because different, the personal statement is just that. It's a chance to express who you are. I'm one who, despite being a urologist, I happen to really enjoy creative writing. So the personal statement for me was something I enjoyed working on. I I felt like I was able to kind of express myself in a different way than the research or kind of the bullet point regimented CV. But it's important to be yourself and kind of show that in your personal statement. And for your personal statement, you should write many, many, many versions and send it to many people as you can, so that they can give you feedback. The interesting thing about doing that is that you might send it to one person who says, I love it, and it's perfect. And then you can send it to the next person who could say, you need to change X to Y. And then you send it to the third person, and the third person says, oh my gosh, never ever change X to Y. That would be terrible. And so as you collect more and more feedback, you can kind of find what best fits you. And then you can also listen to the collective voice of the people that you're sending it to. So if everybody seems to think one paragraph's great, awesome, stick with it. If everybody seems to think that there's one idea or one part of the paper that doesn't flow well, then I would listen to that as well. A few tips before you jump into personal statement writing is that you want to choose an intentional thesis. Know what story you're telling with your personal statement. Another tip that might bring you back to high school English class is to use active voice. And so instead of using is, was, were, try to use action verbs to then show instead of telling what you did. Throughout the personal statement, when I work with students, I often try to have them interspersed around 3 to 4 stories. Two can be fine as well if it works throughout the paper, to kind of help tell this one story as to why they want to become a physician and why they wish to pursue the residency that they want to pursue. Poll question. As I went through the residency application process, I remember discussing with different applicants their personal statements, whether there was a little bit more personal and creative, where they might tell a story, perhaps they use a bit more flowery language, or is it more professional? Both of which can be super important and can convey the story that you need to convey, most certainly, but they can vary. So I'm going to launch this question. Oh, I have to end that one. Sorry. Now I'm launching the third. I am actually curious if you've started your personal statement, or even if you haven't started it, but you're thinking about it a little bit. Tell me, is yours a little more personal, creative? Is it a little more professional? Alrighty, I love it. It looks like we've got a little bit of a mix here. Some people are more personal, creative. Most people seem to kind of have a mix of both. And then there are some that are more professional, and a couple have no idea, which is fair. You'll get there. With that, I'll pass it along to Christina.
Awesome, Coco. Thank you so much. I totally agree with everything you said, and kind of just would love to emphasize the fact that anything on your application is fair game. So you should be prepared for somebody to ask you about every single thing that's on your application. So if you don't think that you can confidently describe an experience that you have had, don't put it on your application, okay? Because it'll look bad. It'll be bad for everyone. Let it go. Put your strongest stuff, the stuff you're most passionate about on there, the stuff you're ready to talk about. We can go to the next slide. So I think that this is a great time to talk about do's and don'ts. So here is a good example of some things that you may not want to do in your personal statement. And the reality is that your personal statement is a piece of writing, and the principles of good writing apply, which are that you want to use active voice, you want to tell a story rather than telling someone a quality you have, show them that you have that quality. And you want to try and find something that's unique to you. And, we all went into medicine, so some of the stuff we're all going to have in common. But if you can, try and find a central thread that's unique to you or to your experience. So in this passage here, this person mentions that they have a passion for complex decision making, and they developed an appreciation for challenging intellectual problems, learned communication skills, and their goal is to go to your training program because they think that that's going to set them up the best. So that's kind of like what the spirit of this is, but they haven't done much to flesh that out, right? And so somebody reading this isn't really going to, you can say as much as you want, but if there's no story to back it up, reading it, you don't know if the person really has these qualities that we're looking for. So, thinking about kind of the summary of the don'ts for this passage, I would say the big takeaways are that you don't want to use passive voice. So was developed, was deserved, observed. You want to use active voice. So I did this, we did that, this demonstrated that. You want everything to be kind of present tense to grab your reader. And then any piece of information or like quality about yourself that you want to convey to somebody else, you should think of a story to demonstrate that. So if you say, I appreciate intellectual rigor, show me an example. If you have good communication skills, show me an example. If you are a really good advocate for your patients, how? What did you do? Did you walk them down to the social work office and help them get home services? Like, what is the thing that demonstrates these qualities? Because that's what program directors want to see. And then, of course, in any place, you want to avoid cliches. Everybody likes science and wants to help people, okay? So throw that away. It's not interesting. Try and find something that's unique. So if we go to the next passage, this is a really good example of a good personal statement. So here they're talking about how a particular patient's chart was a puzzle, and what did they do because they didn't know? They delved into the literature, they read case reports, they went to the patient and asked the patient, what different things were you exposed to? What is your life like? To try and figure out what was going on. And then when they had a good idea, they presented it to their attending, which then changed management for a patient and was diagnostic and therapeutic for that patient. And then they talk about what about that experience was meaningful to them. So they showed their interest in diagnostic challenges. They showed that they're advocates for their patients. And they also described what about this experience made them kind of enraptured in internal medicine. And that's really what you want to do. The person who reads your personal statement at the end should have a very good understanding of why you are doing this field that you're doing, and also what you will bring to the table if you were to come to their residency program. And so here's just a summary of those things, right? Using active voice. What did I do? What did I see? What are the different things that were actively occurring throughout? It keeps the reader locked in. As I've said many times, a great anecdote. This, by the way, again, applies to all the writing that you do, a speech at your friend's wedding, show, don't tell, whatever it is, right? So tell that story that really exemplifies what you're trying to get across. And then trying to kind of tell a story that's unique and specific to you is going to be much more interesting than any kind of like generic statement that many program directors have heard before. Okay. Letters of recommendation, I think people don't realize just how important they are. They are some of the most important pieces of your entire application. I cannot tell you how many times this has come up on the interview trail for residency, for fellowship, and like having been on the back end of residency interviews at our program, these are critical, okay? You need to get a good letter. And what a good letter is a letter from somebody who has worked with you in a decent capacity, meaning that they've worked with you for at least a full rotation, a full research project, something like that. Somebody who you have gotten feedback from that said that they liked what you did, thought you did a good job, and somebody that if you ask them for a letter, they say that they would be able to write you a strong letter of recommendation. So what I usually tell people to ask is find a person that you did a rotation with who gave you the best feedback that you can think of, or somebody that you did a research project with that you carried to the finish, and you email them and you say, hi, I'm going into XYZ. Would you be able to write me a strong letter of recommendation? And they understand the game, right? And if they won't write a good letter, they will say no. And it's okay, move on. That's honestly a gift that they gave you. So make sure that the person you're choosing is the right person, meaning that they know you well and they think that you are a strong clinical researcher, leader, whatever. The other thing is that you want to ask early. I personally give all letter writers at least a month to write a letter. So if the deadline is whatever, September 24th, then the beginning of August, I'm usually asking them. And they're going to use what they know about you to write the letter, but they're going to want other stuff to put in there too, because they understand the assignment, which is to sell this applicant. And so they're going to weave in, what did you do? Your research, your volunteer work, your advocacy, whatever. So they're going to want your CV. So make sure that it's up to date. And they also are going to want your personal statement because they want to know, what is it about this specialty that makes you excited? And what are your career plans, which are often woven into that personal statement right at the end. So have those things ready and when you send out that request. And then of course, like keep, attendings are busy. We know they're busy. They forget to reply to emails. So make sure you're following up with them. You're closing the loop, say thank you. You typically will not be able to read these letters, so it really needs to be like someone you trust. They're going to send it through ERAS and you will not see it until, if somebody like reads it to you on an interview, that's really like the only time, which does happen sometimes and is nice. So you really have to be on top of them, make sure that they get it in on time, and then make sure that it's a good person who's going to set you up for success. All right. ERAS application in general. This is basically a giant resume with a bunch of stuff that you did, some test scores, your MSPE, which is a medical student performance evaluation that aggregates your grades in school, letters of recommendation, some creative writing. And because it is a very large document with lots of content, you want to read it a lot. So typically what I did is I printed the whole thing out on paper, which is not the most environmentally friendly, but I think for me personally, like I need to be, I can't see things. I'm like blind to computer screens. It needs to be like on a paper for me to see a mistake. So I print the whole thing out. I went through, I read the whole thing line by line. I like made my edits. I would go back over and over until it was perfect. And if you have people in your life that you trust, I recommend sending them this stuff. Same thing with the personal statement, right? Making sure that it looks good, that the explanations make sense. And then, specifically when I think about the application versus the personal statement, so your application and your personal statement are sort of like the aggregation of everything you did. But if you use them wisely, you can pretty much guarantee what topics you will get to talk about on your interview. And so I personally tried to use it to my advantage. And I would say, okay, I want to spend time talking about XYZ. I think they're my strengths. I'm going to showcase them in my personal statement. And then I'm going to mark these 3 things as my most important things. You don't want it to be redundant, but you can pick essentially, right? Like what people are going to ask you about, and you can be really prepared for those things. And it's a way that you can market yourself. So try and highlight these diversities and try and be really deliberate about what you're putting in your personal statement and what you're marking as most important so that you can showcase all of your strengths to these programs. And then it is extremely important. So the deadline this year is September 24th. It changes by like a week or so every year, anecdotally. And that is when the programs can start looking at the applications. And as soon as they start looking, they're going to start sending out interviews, and it's on a rolling basis. So if you apply, some specialties are switching from rolling, I should caveat, but a lot of them are still rolling, which means that if you apply earlier, your odds of getting a spot are better for an interview than if you apply later. Like I said, this is actively changing, especially for very competitive specialties, but in general, it still holds true. And so I strongly recommend submitting ahead of time so that you don't get caught in like a technological bottleneck, and also so that your application is near the top of the pile when they start to go through everything. And then the interviews are extremely, extremely important. I think that we've had entire webinars alone on interviews that I've participated in because it's such a richness of things that you kind of want to have down. In general, the approach that you want to have is I tell people that you're marketing yourself. We hate it in medicine. We're very like meritocratic and we're like, look at my grades. No, you have to let all that go. Pretend like you're in business school, like you want to market yourself. So think about like, what are my strengths? How am I going to sell myself to this program? And like, what am I going to be? Am I going to be like the physician scientist who's an 80/20 researcher with a lab? Am I going to be the med ed superstar who's like 80% clinical and teaches the medical school lectures? Am I going to be like the primary care and community advocacy director, and I'm going to be spending most of my time in the community trying to create liaisons with our hospital system, right? These are all different versions of positions in academic institutions, and they kind of want to know who they're getting. So do yourself a favor and try and develop that sort of niche ahead of time. And no one's going to hold you to this, right? You can change your mind, but have an idea of how you're going to market yourself and have an idea of why this program is good for you or not, right? And if it's not good, then you probably shouldn't be applying there, right? Because they're going to ask you, why do you want to come here? And you need to have a good answer. Um, on the internet, there are lists of all of the common interview questions, and we have some of them in this PowerPoint that we'll get to. But what I did and what I recommend people do is you just print out a list of all of the questions, bullet some answers for each one. Don't rehearse a script because then you'll sound like a robot, but just it's so much easier to have a handful of challenging conversations that you had to mediate in the hospital ready when they inevitably ask you that question, because they will. Um, and then make sure you have a good virtual setup. I feel like by now it's like post-COVID enough that everybody has a good home setup, but if you don't, lighting, camera, that sort of thing. And then make sure that you are professional in your communications. So these are some of the key interview questions. And so I strongly, strongly recommend that you take some notes on all of these things so you have an idea. You will be asked to tell them about yourself. You're going to want to keep it under like, I don't know, a minute and a half is probably good, the longest that I would go. Like you want to be pretty brief. And you want to highlight when they say, tell me about yourself, another opportunity for you to direct the conversation, highlight your interests, highlight your goals. They're going to ask you why you're going into your specialty. They're going to ask you your strengths and weaknesses. And I think that one of the most important things that people somehow aren't ready for is like, what is your end goal? I know it's crazy because you're like, I just started, I don't even have the job. Like, how would I know? But they, again, they want to know who they're getting. A lot of their residents are going to get promoted to faculty, right? They want to know, like, what kind of faculty member could this person be? Like, what is our department going to look like? So have an idea. And again, I can't stress enough, no one will hold you to this. Everyone changes their mind as they go through training, but you have to have an idea of what you want to do and you got to sell it. So I want to be a primarily clinical person. I'm really interested in medical education and I want to work in an academic setting, and my subspecialty of interest is like infectious disease, whatever. Have that ready because they'll ask. The other thing that people often aren't prepared for are these behavioral questions. They're like behavioral/ethical. They're just going to be hard social situations and they just want to know how you would handle these challenging situations. They are inevitably conflict related, either like, interpersonal conflict, ethical conflict, what have you. So, make sure that you think about some of these and have some of them ready. And think, eloquently about how you would answer that. I think the reality is, in most cases, everyone knows mistakes are going to be made. And as long as you are honest, communicative, and accountable, it is okay. So kind of being able to communicate that to somebody is really important and will show your maturity. Going to the ethical questions, these are relatively, hopefully, straightforward for folks. Somebody did something that is dangerous. Are you going to report them? Yes, right? But some of them are not as straightforward, right? Like kind of these cultural and interpersonal things. So take a moment to think about them. Take a moment to think about how you would handle the situations. In general, they're going to want to see that you are thoughtfully considering the situation, putting yourself in the shoes of the person that you're interacting with, and then trying to find a way to communicate what's going on and kind of mediate that interaction. And I think specifically with like cultural or religious reasons, right? Like we are, as physicians, we provide information, but we do not dictate care. And so your job is to keep people informed. And as long as they're making an informed decision, it is their decision to make. Lastly, program and fit questions. So you have the internet at your disposal. Any program available is going to have a list of all of the things that they do, right? Our program has, oh, we have a global health program. We go to Tanzania. Oh, we have a med-ed track. Oh, we have a R25 grant research track, right? Do your research before the interview, figure out the things that they have, and then figure out whichever one you want to do. I would even recommend going a step further. And if you're a research person, like find the faculty member that does the research you're interested in so you can name drop them directly and say, like, so-and-so's work on XYZ is really interesting, right? Show them that you are interested, especially in competitive specialties. This will set you apart. And, when they're deciding between lots of people, they're going to want to know, like, what's the likelihood that you're going to come here, right? Like, I was interviewing in California for jobs recently, and I obviously live in Philadelphia. And they were like, are you actually going to move here? And it's a great question, right? But it turns out I have family out there. And then that made a lot more sense to them. So, like, try and kind of sell your interest in the program. Um, and then they'll ask you kind of just like general vibe questions. What do you like? What are you interested in? And occasionally they'll ask you kind of like, what do you think is going to be a challenge in residency and how will you overcome it? And this is a good opportunity to think about all the challenges you faced in med school and how you overcame them, and you can apply those same skills that you learned to this next stage. And so I think that leaves us at the end for the Q&A. I know that somebody, I think it was Gertha that had her hand up. Is that right? Earlier, did you still have a question? That's okay if not, but the floor is open for folks. You are welcome to raise your hand or you can type in the chat any questions that you have for us.
That was great, Christina. Thanks for sharing. I also agree 110% that sometimes it can feel tempting on residency applications to want to put as much as you can on there and get info and fill up all the 10 experiences, but 100% feel not just comfortable, but excited to talk about what you put on your application. Because if you're truly excited and interested in what you put on your application, it's going to come through in the interview when people ask you about it. So I'm glad you highlighted that. It does look like we had a question pop up in the chat, though, that we can answer. What's your advice for geographic preferences? Did you have them whenever you were applying for residency?
Yeah, I did. I applied pretty broadly, but I kind of did have, I knew like I was probably going to be Northeast. Eventually, I got to that point. And I think that so in ERAS, you can kind of like, you can indicate some of your geographic ties and things that bring you to a certain region, but I also think that you can bring it up in your interviews. I will tell you that any person looking at your application is going to immediately make a geographic assumption about you based on your application. So, for example, if you're like me and you went to college in the Northeast and you went to med school in the Northeast, then they're going to assume that you're going to stay in the Northeast. And I did. So, like this sort of thing versus like you're from California, you did all your school in California, whatever. So if you had that, and like, let's say that you did all your school in New York, but you want to move to LA because your partner or your family is out there, then you should make that very clear in your interviews. Like I would say out loud, like, I'm so excited to apply to UCLA. My whole family lives out here. I only came to New York for school and I'm really excited to move back home. Like they need to buy that you're going to go there and like the geographic thing as like the programs take it into very strong consideration. And like if two people are alike and one person seems like they're more likely to geographically stay in a place than the other person, they're going to take the one who seems geographically more likely to pick the program. So that's why you have to be really deliberate with that.
Absolutely. And another way to do it or to signal, let's say you're in New York, but you love California, that you're really interested is to do a sub-I wherever you're really interested as well, because that will show up on your application. So let's say everything you've ever done is in the East Coast, but you've got your heart set on Alaska, go do a sub-I in Alaska because that will show up on your application. Get a letter from somebody in Alaska if that's really where you want to end up.
Coco, do you want to tell us a little bit about like how you went about your answer to the tell me about yourself question?
Oh yeah, that's great. The tell me yourself question is one that I think is great to bullet point, as we mentioned earlier prior to the question. Otherwise, it's easy to meander around long ways because there's a lot to tell about yourself. You've got 25, 28 years of life to share. And so I think the tell me about yourself for me was I gave it like 15 seconds to get to medical school because people don't care a ton about pre-medical school unless it directly relates to medicine. So I might say something like, I grew up in Houston, Texas, but then I was excited to adventure outside of Houston, where I went to Nashville for school. Prior to med school, I did a year of Fulbright in Spain. Then I did a year of research at the NIH, and I was excited to land back in Texas for medical school. In like 20 seconds, it kind of sets them up for my journey from I was born in Houston. I've lived many places, and then I came back to Texas. It set them up to know that I'm somebody who's enjoyed living in many different places. It set them up to know I was somebody who was interested in leaving Texas. And then from there, I might give a little bit more details about what I did in medical school and how it's kind of specific to me. So, one thing I enjoyed doing was I enjoyed interpreting in our clinic. Another thing I did that I was really proud of was I started a vasectomy clinic, which was super relevant to urology, but it also communicated my desire to lead. It communicated my kind of desire to serve other communities as well. And then I got to share a research project as that about that as well. So I think the tell me about yourself question needs to not be a ramble. It needs to be concise and tell a story. And it needs to continue that trajectory of the story that you started in your application. So continuation almost of your personal statement and your experiences, that the story you're telling throughout your application and the interview process is all the same. So whenever do we include where we were born or grew up or something about family or just educational background? Mine was very brief where I was born. I was born in Houston and went to college in Nashville. Just because they're probably not terribly interested about where you were born or how many different places you grew up. Anything else you'd add to that?
No, I think that's great. I totally agree. I think that before you come up with an answer to the question, you need to think about like what your pitch to programs is about yourself and like what your kind of shtick is and what your interests are. And that will guide what you put in that introductory statement. So like for example, if you're somebody who like, for example, like my family immigrated from South America and I was really active in the community and like I led our like free clinic in New York City and did a lot of like advocacy work. So in that case, it was really important for me to mention my like family background and like mention what country my family lives in and like how that relates to the work
Mm.
that I did, right? So like in that situation, that might be a little more relevant, right? So it really just depends on like what values are you trying to convey as to where you want to spend your time, right? Like another example could be like you before med school you got an MBA and like your goal is to like start a health tech company and like fold it into healthcare systems because you feel like the efficiency of healthcare is very poor. So then you may want to spend a little bit of time focusing on like your MBA and what you did and how that related, right? So like it depends again on kind of like what is your end game for residency? Like how are you selling yourself? What are your values you want to market? And then like spin that brief statement to highlight the things that are most important to you.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, this says, is there a way the preference can be communicated prior to interviews to increase chances of interview? Do you mean geographic preference? I assume that's what that means. Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think like Coco said before, a sub-I is like one of the easiest ways to do that, because you have flown there wherever it is or driven, right? Like I did, I think my year was COVID, but like I applied for a lot of sub-Is that then ended up being like virtual silliness because I wanted to have open options. I think that's one way and probably the strongest way. I would say networking at conferences is another opportunity. So there's like every specialty has a regional, national conference you can go to. There's usually a session specifically for residency applicants where you can meet program directors. That's another opportunity. I don't know, Coco, if you have any other ones.
Absolutely. I think that's a great way. And then the other thing is just to be super clear on the application as well, the geographic preference that we're discussing is an actual option. So I think it's early on in the application, they'll ask you, where do you want to signal? So you could say, I want to signal, I can't remember the regions. There's a Northeast region and a South Atlantic region and a Pacific region and a mountain region. So you can say, I want to signal the Pacific region. Obviously, you should be mindful of the fact that if you signal Pacific region, you might have less chance of getting interviews at something in the South Atlantic region. It's certainly not zero, but you are saying, hey, this is where I'd rather end up. So that certainly highlights to programs, this is where I want to be, and also highlights to other programs, this is probably not my top choice. So you'd want to be careful kind of in navigating that. But just to make clear, that's something you can fill out on the application, um, that you can click, yes, I'm interested in this. And then absolutely networking, communicating, getting to know people is a great way to communicate that interest.
Coco, can you think of anything else that in retrospect was really helpful that you did as a part of your like residency prep? Or I should say like application applying season, like anything that in retrospect you're like, oh, I'm really glad I did that.
Yeah. It might be a little late for the majority of our people who are here tonight, since it sounds like the most of the audience is kind of already in the application season. But if you happen to be one who's listening in a little bit of a year early, somebody gave me the advice to keep an Excel sheet of the things I did. So whether that was research or volunteering, and it would have me, I like would track the number of hours, I would track what I did, and then I might even track like a meaningful story or an event that occurred there. So that can be a great thing to remember, that maybe actually that part's not too late. If a meaningful story flies by or a patient experience passes through your head, write it down. You might think you'll remember it, but you probably won't. Write it down so you can then tell that story in your interviews or put it in your personal statement. And so I was really glad that I started that, like, I think my second year of medical school, a document detailing what I did. It made it so that when I was entering things into ERAS, I had all the information right in front of me. I wasn't trying to remember, like, oh, did I start that in September of my first year or October? It's nice to know. But then having the stories in that document as well, it was an Excel spreadsheet for me, was super helpful to then weave those into my personal statement, my experiences, and my interview as well.
That's so awesome. I feel like for the folks who are here a year early, you can now start kind of like collecting this information. Um, that's so interesting. I see in the separate Q&A section that there's a lot of people asking. So there's how to best use signals. Do people see the geographic questions you put? And is it better to put a geographic preference or no preference? A lot of geographic questions. I think what I would say is kind of already what Coco said, like, how important is geography to you, right? Like, there are some people who need to be in a certain place because of their partner, their family, whatever else is going on, their children. If geographic preferences are really important to you, then yes, I would put a geographic preference down. If it is not important, then I wouldn't worry about it, right? Because like that's not your top priority. You'd rather get like the program you want than the place you want. Um, I think that like the question of you won't get an interview unless you signal a program. I don't think that that's 100% true, but I do know many programs tend to interview preferentially people who signal. So I would say that like if there are certain programs you're really interested in, I think it makes sense to signal them to increase your chances, especially because you have the signals available to you. And
Certainly.
the last one is, do they see the geographic regions you put? Like, do they see what you signaled? That I actually don't know the answer to. If you signal like multiple locations, do they see all the places you signaled? I
I
don't
don't
know.
either. I think it's a good question, and I can't remember.
Yeah, I
I think they
suspect.
know if they did not signal your region,
Yeah.
but I don't think they know where you specifically signaled, is what I remember. Or they know
I
you did not signal any.
exactly. I think it's like they signaled me or didn't signal
Yeah.
anything. Yeah.
Yeah. But I will jump into the signals question. That's a little bit different depending on the specialty you're applying. So I'm more familiar with the urology application process. For urology, you have 30 signals. And this is something that is new in just the past 2 years. And it is pretty much across, and it's urology is going to be a more competitive specialty to apply to. And it's pretty consistent across the board that it's really not recommended to apply to more than 30 programs. That was the goal of the signals, to force people to apply to just 30, quit spending thousands and thousands on the application, applying to every program in the nation. Um, and it does seem to be, I would say most people are not getting interviews unless you signal them. I'm certain there's an exception to that rule. Perhaps smaller programs might give you an interview, but that also varies on how many signals and the urology or the residency program you're applying for. So I think anesthesia might have 15. Some have where you give 5 gold and 10 silver. Urology has just 30 across the board. So that would be something that's really good to investigate with your advisor that's specific to the residency program that you're applying to, because you certainly don't want to pay to apply to 150 programs. I think there's 133 in urology. If you know that 100 of those aren't going to pay attention to you. It looks
Yes,
like we
that
also
is.
have, can we explain what is rank order list? Can
Yeah,
we jump
yeah,
into
I'm
that?
happy to do that. I also see a question of just like, are interviews virtual and online, which is like
Oh,
fairly
I
quick
skipped
to
that one. Thank
answer,
you.
or virtual or in person. The answer is like both, and it's specialty dependent. So you need to kind of like look into, I know that a lot of the surgical subspecialties that are more competitive are mostly in person. Other like medicine and medicine related specialties are still online. So it really is variable. It's going to depend on your specialty and the program. Like some programs offer one, the other, or a hybrid. So a rank order list. So something that's important to remember. So when you apply to residency, you use the electronic residency application system, ERAS. And that sends your application and all of the goodies attached to it, letter of recommendation, test scores, etc., to all these schools, and then they can review it. Separate of that, you also have to register for the NRMP, which is the National Residency Matching Program. And this is completely separate from ERAS. It's a totally different thing. And it is a computer algorithm where all the schools have a portal and all the residents have a portal, and you will log into your NRMP, which is separate from your ERAS. You have to pay for it separately, create a separate account, and you make a list of all the programs you want to go to. So you make a rank list and you say like, I want to go to this program first, this program second, third, etc. All of the residency programs that are interviewing applicants will make their own lists saying that these are the 15, these are the 5, these are the 50 residents that we want. And then an algorithm does a bunch of math, and out will pop a combination of residents and programs, okay? And then match day is the day that you find out where you will go. So when you are making your rank order list, it is a ranked ordered list, meaning that you are going to put in order the places you want to go, starting with the place you want to go the most first, and then in descending order to the one you want to go to the least. If there is a place you don't want to go, don't put it on there, right? If you'd rather not match, then go to that place. If it's important to just match, then you put every place down and then you submit it. And there's a deadline every year that also slightly changes, but is somewhere in like the January, February timeframe. So that is what the rank order list is.
Great. It looks like we're coming to the end of our time, but we have a couple more that I think we can answer quickly. I see one in the Q&A. Oh, and I see another one. Well, we'll jump to the Q&A. If my specialty only has 15 signals, should I apply to more than 15 programs where they not offer interviews? This one's tricky for me to answer without knowing that what you're applying to, because this is going to be so unique to the specialty. If it's something more competitive, it's possible that 15 is what you need. It also depends on your scores and your application as well as to whether or not you should apply. So I'm sorry to not fully answer this question, but it's really tough to answer it because it's so specific to the residency you're applying to and to who you are as an applicant. I also see NRMP register after ERAS app submitted. Or do you do that after? You can register at the same time or after, but it's not as time sensitive with that September 24th deadline.
Exactly. I see someone here saying, and I guess that's 9, so this can be our last question. Would it affect negatively if due to financial responsibilities we could only attend virtual interviews? Would those who attended in person have a better chance of being ranked higher? Um, Again, this is very subspecialty specific. So for example, neurology kind of just decided that for financial reasons, they wanted to keep all interviews virtual because otherwise it would be an uneven playing field. But other specialties were like, no, everybody gets to do whatever they want. And then as a result, there are some that are in person and some that are virtual. And anecdotally, I have heard that the people who go to the in-person ones like do see basically, if you go in person, then you're signaling by physically being there that you're interested in the program, right? So this is a great opportunity again to talk to your residency advisor, talk to the program director at your school. what is the landscape like for the specialty I'm interested in and what do I need to do? And then I think there's one more slide, Coco, after. Yep, exactly. So, we really appreciate you guys coming here. I, just am starting my fellowship, so I really remember going through all of this and the residency. It's all ERAS slash like some very similar system. So, we're here for you, and we really love getting people where they want to go. So there's lots of resources there, and then we offer really lovely tutoring, and we really love to do it. And there's an offer code there for you guys to get a discount if you'd like to check it out. That's all I've got.
Absolutely. Thanks everybody for joining. Thanks, Christina.
Thanks, Coco.
Have a good night, guys. Best of luck to you. It's exciting.
Yeah, good luck.
Congrats.
Have fun.
Woo!
It's fun, I promise.